Alright, let's go over quiz number 9. December 14, 2017. This is 4.1 to 4.6, not including 4.4. This is version A. Using the letters in question number 2, match the following by putting one letter per blank. So I recognize that there are 4 letters, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of these 4 letters, Vertex Form has a parentheses to the power of 2. So you could have either put G or I in there and got full credit. You only needed to put 1 per blank, so you had extra options. The one with double parentheses, that's intercept or factor form, that's letter E. In standard form has no parentheses, that would be F in descending order. Question number 2, match the following by putting one letter underneath the graph. One equation will not be used. The hardest one, because there's 2 vertex forms, I have negative x plus 4 squared minus 2. So anytime you see the plus sign, just write it with 2 negatives. Because then that tells you your h value there is negative 4 and your k value is negative 2. So if I go left 4, not that one. So notice how none of these graphs have left 4, down 2. Now here's the tricky part about this. Each of the graphs are different in how they count the x-axis. For example, this one is counting every 2 is equal to 5. So that means each box is equal to 2.5. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to use G. F. A value is opening up, and your y-intercept is negative 1. So I need something that just opens up, so that means I can't use I mean, I can use either these 2 graphs at the end, and this one's not going through negative 1. This one's pretty close, so that would be F. E is in factored form. Remember here, my R value would be positive 1, and my R2 value, the second root, is going to be 5. So 1, 0, and 5, 0. One 0 and 5 0. So here's 1 0, here's 5 0, and it's opening up because it's positive. So this would be letter E. This one here, again, I see the plus sign, just make them 2 negatives. When I have 2 negatives there, you'll see that your h value is a negative 2 and your k value is negative 4. So negative 2, negative 4. Notice how this side x-axis is counting by 2's, and then the y-axis is actually counting by 4's. So pay attention. And then it's a negative a value, so it's opening down, so it's F, I, and E. On your quizzes, I graded the front side of one person, I graded the back side of the other person, and I combined your scores. Foolish are you if your partner had it correct, but I didn't grade your paper. Question number 3. Describe the transformation of f of x given f of x plus 1 minus 2. There's a silly phrase, add to x, go west or left, add to y, go high. So here's adding to x. So that means your graph's going to go left. And then this is not adding to y, but subtracting, so not going high, not going up, or you're going to go down 2. That would be letter H. Question number 4, identify the vertex of the graph, tell whether it's a minimum or a maximum. So the vertex is either the lowest or highest point of your parabola, that would be right here. That has an order pair of the origin, so you can't pick B and you can't pick C. It would have to be either A or D. Now, because this graph is opening up, this is the minimum. So that would be D. Maximum is if it's pointing down, right? Your A value is negative. This would be a maximum, right? If you threw a football at its highest point, that would be your vertex. Alright, so on this problem here, notice here it says, which statement is correct for the quadratic function below? So I have a graph here. I recognize that it gives me a couple of clues. The first clue I have here is that I have a x value, so I have a root here of x equals 1, or root of 1. The second thing I notice is I have one over here. This is at negative 3. So a root of -3, so if I pick this first option, I have x minus 3, right? Do you see that? But if you put the factored form below it, you have x minus r1, so your r1 value is positive 3. And this is not positive 3, that's negative 3. So A would be incorrect. It's the opposite there, right? So that would be a minus 3, and this would be a positive 1 with a maximum value of 8. So B is your correct answer. Notice how I crossed off. Remember, in your parabola, if it opens up, this is always a minimum. Think of your skateboard ramp, right, at the bottom of it. And then if it opens down, like throwing a football, at the highest point, that is your maximum. Question number 5. Choose a term that identifies the effect of the graph on replacing f of x with a of f of x. When your a value is greater than 1, okay, think about it with money. So this is your regular graph, x squared. And let's just say I choose to do 4x squared. Well, 4x squared means I multiply my money faster. Does that make sense? It's going to go up faster, more money. We like that, right? So what's happening is they call this a vertical stretch. It's being stretched away from the x-axis. 5b says their a value is between 0 and 1, so something like 1/2. So again, if I graph it, do I want the banks to penalize me by taking half of my money away? No, my money would grow slower than the original graph of x squared. So what's happening here is that this is being vertically compressed. Okay, it's being flattened, right? And kind of just smushing it. Turn to the back side. I just took this directly from a packet. Use your knowledge or reference points to write a quadratic function for the examples previously identified in unique parabolas in problem 1. If it is not possible to write a function, state why or why not. So in the graph, I give you some hints. Vertex is -3, 4, so that's h and k. And then this other point is just x and y. Well, if they give you the word vertex, you should use vertex form. And then we're solving for the a value because that's the missing letter. You put in your x value of -4, h value of -3, k of 4, and your y value of 1 from over here. And then -4 minus a -3, well, opposite of -3 is a +3. -4 plus 3 is a -1. -1 squared is just 1, +1. So this should read, let's see if I made, this should read 1a, -1 squared is 1, so this should be a +1. And then if I subtract 4 from both sides, then I have -3, so this is a +1, so a value should be -3. So that should read f of x equals -3 times x plus 3 squared plus 4. So if this is your vertex, you can also graph the axis of symmetry. And to practice reference points, if you're counting 1 towards that line, you can count 1 past it, and then you can just graph it. And that will help you verify also that your a value should have been negative. Okay. I gave you 2 points. If you stated x plus 3 squared plus 4, so you put in the vertex, but you did not find the a value. Question number 7. Write an equation for the parabola below in standard form. The most common mistake is this is not the vertex. So how do you know this is not the vertex? Class is 0, 6, the highest point. This is the highest point, right? That vertex is not. So you can't use vertex form. Does that make sense? Here's another clue of what you should be using. Pay attention to what they've given you. They've given you x-intercepts. R1 is equal to -2 and R2 is equal to 3, or P is equal to -2 and P is equal to 3. I just put that into my factored form. Every x value I'm going to write 0. Every R1 value I'm going to write -2. And every R2 value I'm going to put 3. So this becomes 0 plus 2 and 0 minus 3. My y value becomes 6. So I have 2 times a -3, which is -6. This does not say a minus 6 because it's multiplication. Notice how they're next to each other, so you can think of it as 6 is equal to -6a. Divide -6 on both sides, you get a equals -1. You're going to take your a value of -1, put it back in there, put in your 2 roots, and you're going to distribute because it asks you for standard form, so you're going to use FOIL, and distribute the -1, you'll get y equals -x squared plus x plus 6. Question number 8, these were each 2 points, so quite a bit of credit. I is equal to square root of -1, don't forget to box your answers. I squared is equal to I times I, because it's really I to the 1 plus 1. So I is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. And this will just equal -1 because the pairs come out. I to the 3rd power is I squared times I, because this is I squared to the 2 plus 1. I squared is equal to -1, and you have that times I. So you can think of this as -I or negative square root of -1. Either of these would have been fully acceptable, 2 points each. And I to the 4th is I squared times I squared, because remember it's I 2 plus 2. I squared, if you look over here, is -1. So -1 times -1 is a positive 1. Question number 9. Multiply I to the 12th, or multiple choice, simplify I to the 12th power. So you can do this in a couple of ways. First way is I just did division of 4. 4 goes into 12 3 times, but your remainder is 0. So your remainder becomes your exponent. Anything to the 0 power is equal to 1, and that's your answer. Another way of doing this problem is doing I to the 4th power to the 3rd power. It's called the power rule because that means you multiply those two and you get I to the 12th. So I to the 4th is 1, and 1 times itself 3 times is just 1. Question number 10. When the bell rings, leave quietly because I'm still recording. Number 10 says simplify. So again, I expressed to you guys, you need to pay attention to the math operation between those. Notice there's a minus sign, so you need to distribute. That becomes a -2 and a positive 3i. The like terms here are 3i and 3i become 6i, and 5 and a -2 become positive 3. Question number 11. Pay attention, there is no math operations between the two of these. So you're just going to, you can use FOIL or my box if you did the box. 2 times 5 is 10, 5 times -3 is -15i, 2 times 3 is 6i, and 3i times -3i is -9i squared. Remember, I squared is equal to -1, so negative times negative is a positive. Add those two together, you get 19, so I get 19 minus 9i. You only got 3 points if you did not simplify I squared to be -1. Some students didn't box the correct answer. You have multiple answers on there, so you're making me choose, which does not make me happy. So 26 points on the front, 22 points on the front, and then that was out of 48.